So now that we have seen a brief picture of what all events took place in Indian economy until 1991. The huge economic crisis of 90s, the problem of balance of payments, fiscal deficit, internal debt, and the inability of the government to maintain the basic minimum needed forex reserves. Now, all this culminated, as we spoke about the other day, in 1991 LPG, the Liberalization, Privatization and Globalization model taken up by the Narasimha Rao government. Now, we also know that after this, there was a sudden change because, on the one hand, the government was now more open to allowing foreign investment in India. The government was more focused on allowing multinational culture to grow in India. The government opened up to other countries for trade in goods and services. India, from being a closed economy, now became an open economy. There was more and more importance being given to private industries, and the loss-making public sector industries were also tackled. Government did realize that the iron hand or the force and the interference which it was having in the economic sector was not needed. That was not doing any good. So once we know broadly the changes as we just discussed of the LPG reforms, after 1991, the growth trajectory changed. But we cannot say that everything changed for good. Naturally, for some time, there was a revival of the economy, specifically until 1994. But then again, after a few years, a slump or a slowdown came. So Indian economy again was very choppy until the coming few years. There was a brief period of revival from 2002 to 2008, again marked by a slight slowdown. And then in 2016, a very memorable event happened when on 8th November, the government led by Prime Minister Shri Modi announced the demonetization. And we understand demonetization in economics as the discontinuation of a particular currency from the legal tender system, which means something that is being regarded as a valid legal currency until now will stop being so in times to come. It's not like for the first time Indian government had taken a decision for demonetizing. There was one demonetization back in 1946, which was partially successful. We again had a wave of demonetization in 1978. And eventually in 2016, we had a major demonetization where 500 and 1000 rupee notes were discontinued from the currency system completely. Now, the government cited the main reason behind this demonetization as curbing corruption, stopping money laundering, and terrorist financing, and bringing back all the money that was circulating in the economy as black money back to the banking system. Now, already the government had taken the decision much before the announcement came to the public because the RBI or the Reserve Bank of India was already publishing 2000 denomination notes. But once the public came to know about this in November 2016, there was a huge outcry. Now, whether demonetization did some good as per the claims of the central government and RBI, or whether demonetization created further slowdown and backwardness of the economy are things that are hugely debatable even today. However, it came like a mixed bag of some positives and some negatives. And therefore, the entire 10-year period from 2010 to 2020 is generally known as a lost decade. Also, after 2020, the pandemic kicked in, and with the coronavirus came a major economic downturn. We know that how it led to rising inflation because all supply chains, transport, communication, trading activities came down. We also know that barely had our economy recovered from the blow of demonetization that we got caught up into the COVID-19 situation, which meant a huge spree of unemployment, a huge spree of poverty, falling markets, and hence closing down businesses. So this was again a very dark period for the economy. Now let's go back to the immediate LPG period and what happened after this. We have already seen the steps taken under LPG. An immediate fallout was that while the government was cutting down on customs duty and excise duty, exports from India improved dramatically. There was a much higher export capacity that India gained. There was a much better forex reserve accumulation. There was a much better inflow of technology, which again helped our manufacturing sector. At the same time, because of better foreign direct investment, the economy picked up. So again, the economy kept wavering with periods of sudden increase and high growth, and then interspersed with periods of slow growth. Because at the same time, the agricultural growth was not turning out to be very positive. Besides, the industries were leading to economic growth, but they were not generating enough employment that was needed for the urban Indians as well as from the immigrants from rural India because of declining agriculture. So the unemployment level was rather on the higher side. Now, a lot of people also call the phenomena of the mismatch between the promised foreign direct investment or what we think it will be and what actually happens in reality as hanging investment. So again, this became a phenomena that was marring the growth of our economy during the period from 94 to 2002. No wonder the economic growth was overall slow. However, again, the period from 2002 to 2008, we saw a sudden spike in industrial output. The reason being a stronger and a much robust foreign direct investment. Many more multinationals coming and establishing in India, not only generating consumer demand, but also creating employment to many more people, offshoring from European and American companies, given that India had cheap and easy labor available. All these factors did result in revival of industrial growth for this short period. The government further curbed import tariffs and other taxes, which led to ease of doing business, many more investments in India. And the sheer improvement of service sector was also a big cause of industrial improvement. Government invested more in ICT, the information communication technology. We were already talking about globalization 4, which meant now India was a major supplier of human resource or human capital for the multinationals across the globe. As well as its supply chain became better. There was a much better infrastructure, transport, communication growth in India, much better mobile usage in India. The data revolution was beginning. All this again led to a sudden spurt in consumer demand, which resulted in better industrial growth. However, the immediate year following, that was from 2008 to 2009, again, due to not just domestic but also global factors, the industrial growth lagged behind. One major reason here became the rising oil prices. Specifically, also rising metal prices, rising prices of ores, and other basic commodities. This again resulted in inflationary pressure in the economy. The interest rates increased, making investment unaffordable to a huge chunk of population. Alongside many other sectors of the economy, such as construction, real estate, wood products, basic metals also saw a decline. Generally, the two main reasons considered behind this 1 year slowdown are one, the decline in domestic demand, and another, less demand which originates from exports. So there was a double hit which economy experienced. Now we already touched upon the lost decade, a period which also talks of a demonetization phase. At this point of time, although all reforms have already been undertaken, India is emerging as a service sector hub. India is emerging as a growing economy with better infrastructure, strong human capital, a massive destination for corporate outsourcing, internet revolution. But despite that, the decade from 2010 to 2020 saw a massive rise in inflation. And the sudden change of government also is considered responsible for a complete U-turn. Why? Because when the new government was elected back in 2014, it resulted in discontinuation of the initiatives that were taken by the previous government, only to be replaced by newer initiatives and the new economic regime which comes with the new government. So the change of gears and the change of administration was also responsible in a big way behind a lot of policies that would not see the light of the day, a lot of initiatives which did not do any benefit, and hence the growth staggered. Alongside demonetization, the goods and services tax or the GST also impacted business in a major way. So, because of these events, the decade from 2010 to 2020 is generally considered as a complete lost or a very obscure decade in Indian economy. Now, there was a high rate of unemployment. Industry was unable to generate high productivity formal sector jobs. So as we realize, the story of Indian industrialization and the evolution of modern industry has been something that has been far from uniform. It has had a very choppy, very up and down trajectory. There has been spikes and then there has been extreme low growth periods too. However, what we need to understand more importantly, given that we are studying social change associated with industry, is that how do these ups and downs of industry sector or how this sudden industrialization, modernization and urbanization impact our cultural and social fabric. Now, if you remember in the beginning, I had mentioned to you that it is always economic or it is always geographic factors which lead to some cultural change or social change as we call it. Why? Because I told you culture is nothing but a means of adaptation. What we eat, what we wear, the language we use, and our lifestyle is all about how we adjust with external circumstances. For example, to a Ladakhi tribal living in, say, Leh, the dressing will be woolen dressing. The foods will be generally the ones which are associated with generating more heat for the body. There is more prevalence of alcoholism in these areas. Why? Because we know that these are cold climates. However, if we compare this cultural practice of wearing a particular kind of clothes, consuming alcohol, to the lifestyle of somebody who's the inhabitant of a coastal area, then you will see a radical difference in lifestyle, food, clothing, everything. Not only will clothing will be radically different as per the climate demand, but also they will consume more of seafood, they will consume more of things like coconut water, which is considered overall a cooling ingredient in human diet. So a lot of things change when we change geographical locations. Also, our cultural practices depend upon our financial condition. There is a huge difference of the cultural practices among people of the so-called high class and the people who belong to the poor segment of society. Not only can they not match with regards to the food that they can afford to eat, but also clothing, also the language. There is something known as classical language, classical dance. Why the words classical? Because from the beginning, not only were they rooted in tradition, but it was also widely believed that not all segments of population will be able to appreciate these kind of arts. For the normal public, we have the more mass-oriented entertainments like the folk art, the folk music, and how they differ from the classical music, classical art. So that's the basic difference. Your money, your finance also decides what your culture will be like, what you can afford to do, what you cannot afford to do. So definitely culture fluctuates. It's never really the same. Within the same society also, it's very different, one geography to another, one financial condition to another. Having said this, we know that definitely there is a massive impact of industrialization on Indian culture. So what has been that impact? In which all areas do we feel this impact? Tomorrow should you get a question from UPSC that what is the association between industrialization and the consequential social change? Or how did India experience culture change because of industrialization and urbanization? Obviously, you need to do this answer by covering various segments of society. What could these institutions or segments be? Family, economy, occupation changes, demographic or population changes, the structure and the pattern of population distribution, urbanization, stratification system, which has a lot to do with occupation, political changes as well as religion changes, not changes as in which new religions have come, change in the sheer importance and domination of religion in human life. So we shall study all these phenomena with a very technical sociological perspective. What do you call them in sociology and how have these segments changed should be our focus. Let's begin with family. Because you know that family is a very, very universal institution of human society. Apart from few countable human communities, by and large, all societies across the globe do follow some of the other family system. Naturally, they can be different. Some people may follow the matrilineal, some people could be following the patrilineal system, some families could be matrilocal, neolocal, patrilocal, patriarchal, matriarchal. Obviously, things will change. Families could be joint, they could be nuclear. Families could be a production unit, they could be a consumption unit. Families could be a very, very modernized, specialized unit. Families could be self-sufficient units. Families could be composed of primary kids, families could be extended families. So we know that families can have various varieties across human societies, but one thing we must remember is that family is absolutely a universal institution of by and large all known human societies. Another thing is family is also very important to understand because family happens to be the primary institution or the primary source of socialization. That is something we must remember. Now, what is socialization? We know that socialization is the art of learning how to become a member of society. A newborn child shall never know or will never know how to behave in society. He or she will never know their identity from birth. They don't even know their gender. They don't know that because it's something that they learn from people around them by socialization. So, socialization essentially is that process. Some sociologists also call this that training, which enables us to become members of our communities or our groups, rather, our societies. It begins right since birth. The first place where we socialize is known as family. Therefore, family is the primary agent of socialization. Some people also call family as the mini society, a small version of society. Because everything that you will grow up and learn in society, you get to see a trailer of that within the family. What's your identity? Your gender, your religion, your region, your nationality, your class, your caste, your race. All these things are told to you from the family. It's your parents, your relatives who tell you. What kind of behavior should you display? What language should you use? What food should you eat? The kind of clothing that's appropriate, inappropriate for you. How religious you are. Do you believe in Western culture or do you completely reject it? Are you traditional or are you very, very secular in your ideas? All these things we learn and adapt from the family. Therefore, the family is the most important agency which we need to understand in terms of how has it changed in the face of industrialization. Now, if you remember, in one of our lectures in the beginning of this chapter, we spoke about the classical sociological theorists, Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. We know that all these three have clearly said that somewhere industrialization is associated with unhappiness. With industrialization, modernization, human lives will become less happy. Why? Because obviously the feeling of solidarity, The feeling of love and attachment with your own group comes down when you learn how to go out, when you become more Western, modern, industrial. That's something all of these people believe. So that's a common belief that always industrialization will create some unrest in society, some problem it will bring. How does it really impact the family? Let's consider a very Indian scenario. Now, in India, you know that a majority population was used to living in the agriculture sector, in the rural communities. Now, these rural communities or these villages were also communities which had a very mechanical solidarity in the words of Imai Durkheim. Everybody knew each other. They were attached to each other very informally. They were all an extension of the same kind of clan. So, in this kind of a village or rural setup, the family was the most important thing with which you associated yourself. Why? Because family here was a self sufficient unit. Now, that is something you must understand. That the traditional, typical Indian family, most people have the habit of saying traditional Indian family is joint family. Yes, it was joint, but more importantly, it was a self sufficient unit. Now, why is it a self sufficient unit and why do we call it this? Is because family used to take care of all human needs. Fundamentally, family used to be a unit of production. Whatever food should be consumed was grown by the family members on the agricultural land. Whatever money the family required was coming by selling this agriculture product. Even if they were doing handicrafts, all family members would together contribute in that. We spoke about it already when we were discussing industrial revolution and the change from household manufacturing to factory system. We did mention this if you remember. And all members of the family associated in a simple division of labor. And men, women, children, elderly people, all members of the family would together work to produce either agriculture goods or some handicraft. But everybody was working together. Family was producing its own food, its own money, and hence it was a unit of production. Now, since all members were together working on the same occupation, all of them lived in the same house, which means a family also was a joint family because multiple generations would live together. People along with their children, people along with their siblings, people along with the children of their children. 3, 4 generations would together cohabit in the same house and together contribute to the same work. And hence, the family was a unit of production, it was a joint family. Why self-sufficient? Because not only was it producing its own money, which means it was taking care of its economic need, it was also taking care of its religious need. At that point of time, we never really associated with many people outside of our immediate family or outside of our immediate group. Religion was not something as it is today. Today, social media, mass gatherings, they have become symbolic of religion. But at that point of time, family was something which would pass on religious values to you. It was family which told you the norms, the folkways, the modes, the traditions that you have to abide by. And hence, family was also taking care of your religious cultural needs. The family was together celebrating all the festivals. The family was together practicing all the dance and music. The family was the ultimate source of entertainment. People would sit together, eat together. They would discuss. They would spend time with each other. People would also connect over food. They would connect over political issues. They would connect over things around themselves. They would also connect over celebrating small, big occasions, which means family was not only a source of economic need, also religious, cultural need. Apart from that, some people say also the need of complete socialization. Because at that point of time, children were not really sent to daycares and creches. Old people were not sent to old age homes. Children, once they grow up, would not leave your house with their spouses and get divided into a separate identity. They would always live with you, which means family could also take care of your socialization and emotional need. The young members and the old members, all the dependents would be taken care of within this family. The work of the family was divided among the members. You never really had maids or cooks or urban club and other such agencies which would send you employees to work in your house. So cleaning, cooking, child rearing, socialization, all these activities were taking place within the family. The family also decided what's your career going to be? Whom will you marry? At what age will you get married? Whom will you not marry? Which member of the family will be allowed to work outside and which will not? So therefore, family was also taking care of its own political discussions. There was no government to tell us that you cannot marry before 21 or 18. There was no government at that time to say that you should be open to marrying outside your caste and your village. There was no government to tell you about Gotra and Pinder exogamy. There was no government to legislate the Special Marriage Act 1954 to tell you that you can also marry outside your religion. Such things were not existing. There was no government to promote women empowerment by telling families, as it tells today, that please control your population, have a small family. Such things did not exist at that time. All the decisions, how many kids to produce, whether women will be allowed to go out or not, it was rested with the male head of the family. In that way, the traditional Indian family was also very patriarchal in nature because it was always the oldest man of the family who would take all these decisions. Often, in Indian joint families, he was known as the Karta. And Karta was the ultimate source of power. And hence, it was a very patriarchal, a very centralized kind of family, where All the rules and regulations were made within the family. And hence we call this as self-sufficient unit because it was taking care of its economic, cultural, emotional, sometimes even medical. Modern medicine was hardly there. People would normally resort to home treatments or self-care. So they would take care of each other within the family. Traditional medications, herbs, that's what they would consume really. So medical needs, socialization needs, the need of protection, financial needs. Because some theorists also compare the traditional Indian joint family to a socialist enterprise or a socialist unit because in these families the members would receive according to their needs and they would contribute according to their capacities. There was no compulsion that all members will earn the equal amount of money or all members will contribute the same kind of labor. Together they were doing a mutual cooperation kind of division of labor. It was very mutually cooperative. It was very symbiotic. They all benefited from that together. So therefore, a family was also like a very socialist unit. It would take care of your financial needs. It would take care of your religious needs, it would take care of your political needs. And hence, this traditional Indian joint family was not only a unit of production, but also, please kindly write this down, it was a self sufficient unit. Now, this was the traditional nature of Indian family. So, therefore, it is very, very easy to understand that how did it change because of industry and urbanization? Yes, it changed because when the British government formally laid down industries which were massive in scale, like the railways, the telegraph, the postal services, the ports, what happened? People from the villages started migrating to the cities, the newly created cities, for getting better money. Why did they need to migrate? Because agriculture was not productive anymore. Because we have already discussed how British government led to a devastation of Indian agriculture by introducing land sealing, by introducing new revenue systems, by introducing commercial agriculture, by ruling handicrafts, also by taking away our raw material for free. We know that they deprived our agriculture sector. Hence, people were now not in a situation to continue to feed their large joint families on agriculture only. And hence, a lot of members decided to migrate to the urban areas. Once you leave your family and you go to the urban area, what changes come in your family? The very first change is that it will not be a joint family anymore. So, therefore, there is a structural change in the family. Now, do remember, in your UPSC optional paper 2, they will never ask you a question, what are the changes in Indian family? They would generally ask you what are the structural and functional changes in Indian family. Now, this is the kind of question which has multiple times also appeared in GS paper 2. Okay, so therefore, do remember they will say that structural and functional changes in the family. Always remember, structure is about size, and functional is about role or the function of something. So therefore, if we talk about the structural and the functional changes in traditional Indian family system, the structural change is because of industrialization, urbanization, families are not joined or extended. They are becoming nuclear or small fragmented families because not the entire family will be in a position to go to the urban area. Only few members will go. With them, maybe their children or their immediate husband, wife, spouses will go. Not everybody will go. And hence the family breaks down. So therefore the structural changes, the size of the family is reducing. But what's the functional change? The biggest functional change is that from a unit of production, now the modern family, the nuclear, the fragmented family is also going to become the unit of consumption. Because today the modern families in urban India are not producing their own money. Today we are getting salary. We are consumers. Either we work for the government or for private enterprises or we do our own small business. And that's where we are earning money. So primarily which means we need others and we need the help of other agencies to generate our money. Plus we are not even growing our own food. We generally have to buy everything we need. All our necessities are happening at the cost of commercialization. We have to buy everything from medicines to food, sometimes even to water. Everything we are purchasing, and hence from a unit of production, the biggest functional change is we are becoming a unit of consumption. Another major change in terms of functional change is that from a self-sufficient unit, which was taking care of all the needs, it is becoming a specialized unit. Why is the modern nuclear family a specialized unit? Because today's modern nuclear family is specializing in just two things. One is taking care of the members physically, emotionally. Second, taking care of the members financially. If you have children, you will give them food, education, clothing, everything they need. Similarly, if you have elderly in your family, it's your duty, and generally most people do provide them some necessities because they need them. Apart from that, if my family members are not well, there is emotional love and care which they share with each other. Maybe a source of identity. But apart from that, there is nothing which the modern family can do for us. Why? Because all the functions of the traditional Indian family, religious, cultural, socialization, economic, political, entertainment, all of this has now been outsourced to formal specialized agencies. For example, today if you need to clean your house, rather than the family members doing, a majority urban families would either hire a professional maid or they will employ services from somebody like the pest control people or the people who will come for a proper cleaning like the urban club company, the urban company, or sometimes you also have the baba jobs and all these other agencies which provide you you know, labor to do your basic maintenance. Apart from that, today young children go to school for education. It's not the family which is teaching them primary education, let alone primary education. Now we have the Anganwadi system that the new education policy seems to be suggesting, which means preschool is equally important, the preparatory school, which means children from the age of 2 have to go out to learn, to socialize, something which earlier family was doing on its own for a very long time, maybe all life, but now it's not like that. Similarly, even after school, mothers, because they are primarily working and there's hardly anybody to take care of children, they are sent to either daycare or they are sent to a creche where they are taken care of, they are fed their food. Why? Because nobody in the family has the time for that. We are becoming very commercialized. And hence, even as an agency of socialization, the family is losing its value. Third thing, elderly people are sent to old age care homes. Now, a recent survey says that the number of old care homes in India is rising tremendously, Kerala topping the list. Why? Because we know that as we are commercializing, most people do not have time to take care of the elderly and the dependent population. Hence, they are generally sent to either special medical centers or they are sent to old age care centers, which means socialization and caretaking is also not happening within the family. Today, family is not even serving as the main agent of entertainment. For entertainment, people have specialized places like PVR, movie halls. People have play areas where they go and they do things like go-karting and bowling, and they eat out in restaurants, they go to malls for shopping, they do tourism, traveling. Why? Because family is not giving you all entertainment and comfort. Another thing is, now family will not decide at what age should a person get married? Because now we have the formal rules, the government rules which decide that for us. That is a basic minimum age to get married. Family will not decide whom should you marry because today we are all living in urban industrial places. We interact with thousands of people. We know that today marriages are taking place outside caste, within Gotra, within Pind. Marriages are taking place outside religion. Marriages are taking place with foreign nationals. Why? Because now the government is allowing you. So the government's interference in decision making has increased, which means family has place outside religion. Marriages are taking place with foreign nationals. Why? Because now the government is allowing you. So the government's interference in decision making has increased, which means family has also lost its political domination or role. In the end, the family also now is losing its cultural religious value because today we are living in a society which has hybrid culture. It is not completely Indian, it is not completely Western, it's a mix between both. Today we know we use English language, we wear clothes which are very Western, we eat food from all different places across the globe. We know that our values, the music that we tune into, the dance styles that we are following, the language, the behavior that we adapt, it's coming to us through social media platforms. We can interact with just anybody across the world, which means our own typical traditional culture values take a backseat. We are becoming more secular in our ideology, which means religion is not now deciding what to wear, what to eat, whom to marry. It's only the new hybrid culture which decides everything, and we are becoming very individualistic as well. We do not want the interference of anybody from the family. People want to take their own decisions, and hence the family is changing not only structurally but also functionally. So I hope you understood the major change in Indian family. Now, obviously, a lot of people have criticized the family as well. If you were to go by a very Marxian and a very feministic school of thought, then you would definitely agree that family, from a very conflict perspective, is also an agency of subordination and exploitation. Why? Because you know that family, which is very patriarchal in nature, sees a kind of division of labor in which women are the ones who will always do more work. They will always have no time for themselves. They will always not be allowed higher education, independence, and decision making capacity. So, from a very Marxian feminist point of view, which a lot of feminist thinkers like Anne Oakley would suggest, that families are also hotbeds of exploitation. But again, this is a very conflict viewpoint. If we go by the functionalist viewpoint, which always sees the benefit of social institutions, and family is the best and the most universal agency of not only socialization but also transmission of culture values from one generation to another. So there is always this debate that goes on. And hence, for a lot of thinkers who are conflict thinkers, the industrial modern family is nothing but rooted in women exploitation and a very engendered division of labor. Now, these people believe that before industrialization came, family was a unit of production, which means everybody would work together in the family. So there was no scope of any gender division of labor. Men and women will work together within the family and in the farms. It's only when the factory system and industrialization came that men had to go out of the family and work in industries, leaving behind women to take care of children and domestic chores. This began the whole concept of gender division of labor, and hence it is very exploitative in nature.